The county hadn't seen a summer like this in 40 years. Ponds that had never gone dry were cracked mud. Pastures that should have been green were the color of old paper. One by one, the ranches along the valley road were losing the fight. Water trucks rumbling down driveways. Cattle sold for whatever price they could get. Families standing at fences they could no longer afford to fill. And then, there was one ranch that didn't look like the others. Past the dust and the dying grass, past the empty stock tanks, there it was. A stretch of land still green, as if the drought had forgotten it existed. Grazing across it, unimpressive to look at, were 17 bison, thin, shaggy, the kind of animals nobody at the auction had wanted not long before. Neighbors who had once laughed at the sight of them now stood quietly at the fence line, saying nothing at all. Nobody could understand how the weakest-looking animals in the county had saved the only green ranch left standing. How did this happen? If stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary answers in nature mean something to you, subscribe and join us. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing this community grow from all around the world. 2 years before that drought, Asa and Marlo Whitfield had bought a ranch that almost nobody believed in. The previous owner had walked away from it broke and exhausted. The soil was thin, the fences were falling down, and the Whitfields had little room left for mistakes. Around town, people were polite about it, but not hopeful. A young couple, a tired piece of land, and a bank loan that would need paying whether the rain came or not. Marlo was the one who noticed things. The way a patch of grass grew differently after rain. The way the soil smelled different near the old creek bed. Asa was the one who simply kept working, day after day, with the kind of patience that doesn't ask to be noticed. Together, they made a strange kind of sense. The most respected rancher in the county, a weathered, no-nonsense man named Roscoe Bellamy, had run cattle on the same land his whole life. He liked the Whitfields well enough. He just didn't think they'd last. Could two people with more hope than experience actually survive their first years on a ranch that had already broken someone else? The answer came from an unlikely place. A sad little auction, 2 counties over, where a struggling ranch was selling off everything it had left, including 17 bison nobody wanted. They were thin, scruffy, and unimpressive. The kind of animals people walked past without a second look. Even the visiting veterinarian seemed doubtful, shaking his head as he looked them over. Other ranchers laughed outright. "Good luck with those," one of them said, loud enough for everyone to hear. But Marlo and Asa noticed something nobody else seemed to care about. These animals weren't sick. They were simply bison, built exactly the way bison have always been built. For millions of years, bison shaped the grasslands of North America, evolving to handle brutal winters and dry summers without complaint. Unlike cattle, which graze a single spot down to the dirt, bison move in loose herds, grazing briefly and moving on, giving the grass time to recover. Their hooves break up compacted soil instead of packing it down, and their manure feeds the microscopic life that keeps soil healthy. Sometimes, nature already solved the problem long before people started fighting it. Could these ugly, unwanted animals actually be the answer the ranch needed? Word travels fast in a small county, and the feed store became the place where the story got bigger with every telling. Someone started calling the Whitfield place the Bison Circus, and the name stuck. Roscoe Bellamy stopped by one afternoon, not unkindly, but firm. "You don't build a serious ranch with animals nobody else wants," he told them. It stung more than either of them admitted out loud. There were quiet nights where Asa and Marlo wondered if everyone else might be right, if they'd made a fool's bet with money they didn't have to spare. But they kept the bison. They kept watching, and they kept working. Slowly, almost too slowly to notice at first, something began to shift. The grass in the fields where the bison grazed grew thicker than the grass left untouched. Bare patches of dirt that had been there for years began filling back in. Insects returned in greater numbers, and with them came birds that hadn't been seen on the property before. Native grasses that the previous owner had given up on started pushing back through. What the Whitfields were witnessing were the basics of regenerative pasture management. Deep roots holding soil and moisture in place, rotational grazing mimicking how wild herds moved, and life slowly rebuilding in soil pushed too hard for too long. It wasn't a miracle. It was patience, paying off in small, quiet ways. But just as hope was creeping back in, the Weather Service issued a warning that silenced every celebration before it could start. The region was heading into what forecasters were calling the worst drought in decades. It came exactly as predicted, and then it got worse. One by one, the neighboring ranches began to break. Ponds that had held water for generations turned to cracked mud. Ranchers hauled water by truck just to keep their herds alive. Feed prices climbed, and families who had held on through hard years before finally started selling cattle they couldn't afford to feed. The whole county braced for the worst. And yet, on the Whitfield Ranch, the 17 bison kept doing exactly what they had always done, grazing calmly, moving steadily across pasture that somehow was still holding on. Nobody could explain why. Not yet. If you've ever been laughed at for trying something different, subscribe to the channel. Some of the greatest ideas in farming started with people others called foolish. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Just because the grass held didn't mean the pressure let up. The bank called about the loan, reminding the Whitfields how thin their margins were. Feed prices kept climbing, eating into savings they didn't have much of. Marlo found herself quietly doubting the decision that had once felt so clear, and neighbors suggested it might be time to sell the bison and start over with something familiar. Then came a wildfire scare. 2 ridges over, smoke visible from the porch for 2 days. Not long after, the well feeding their home and barn began running lower than it ever had. For a while, it stopped being a story about a ranch and became a story about a marriage. About 2 exhausted, scared people unsure whether they could keep carrying each other through a year this hard. Would the Whitfields make it through together, or would the drought take more from them than just water? The answer to why their pasture had survived had been growing underground the entire time. Where the bison grazed, deep-rooted native grasses had taken hold again, roots reaching far deeper than the shallow grasses most cattle ranches rely on. Those roots had spent 2 years pulling moisture from below the surface, storing it and releasing it slowly. The soil itself, rebuilt by 2 years of grazing and manure, had become something like a sponge, holding water that would otherwise have run off or evaporated. The greater variety of plants and insects wasn't just pretty to look at, it was protection. A diverse pasture is a resilient one, able to absorb shocks that a single, overworked type of grassland cannot. It wasn't luck. It was 2 years of letting the land repair itself, in exactly the way it had been designed to. Just as it seemed the worst might be behind them, a section of fence gave way during a storm, and several bison wandered onto the county road. Smoke from a fire 3 ranches over choked the sky for a full day. Then, in the middle of it all, the water system feeding their home pump failed completely. For a few terrifying hours, it looked like everything the Whitfields had built over 2 hard years might unravel in a single bad week. It was cooperation, not luck, that pulled them through. Neighbors who had once mocked the bison showed up to help round them up. Asa fixed the pump with parts borrowed from a rancher who had once called the whole project foolish. Marlo's records of where the grass held strongest told them exactly where to move the herd. Every lesson the land had quietly taught them over 2 years came together at once. The drought reached its peak that week, and the Whitfield Ranch held. Roscoe Bellamy drove out not long after, the way he had 2 years earlier, except this time there was no warning to give. He walked the fence line in silence, looking at pasture that was still green, while every ranch around it had turned brown. I laughed because I judged those animals by how they looked, he admitted finally. It wasn't a grand apology, but it didn't need to be. Within weeks, the same neighbors who had once joked about the Bison Circus were knocking on the Whitfield's door, asking for advice instead. What started as one stubborn couple and 17 unwanted bison slowly became something bigger. Young ranchers in the county began experimenting with rotational grazing of their own, and conversations at the feed store shifted from jokes to genuine questions about soil health and native grasses. As the Japanese farmer and philosopher Masanobu Fukuoka once suggested, farming's deeper purpose was never only the harvest, but the people the work shapes along the way. And in the Whitfield's Valley, that idea had quietly come true. Nature often hides its greatest answers inside things people overlook. The 17 skinny bison were never the real miracle. The miracle was learning to work with the land instead of trying to control it. And sometimes, the things the world calls weak are simply waiting for the right conditions to reveal their strength.